Hey everyone, welcome back to Lady Empire. I have such an amazing guest here with me today. Rena, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
So, I first just want to start off with you telling us a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing. I know that you have some experience with sexual abuse and extreme trauma within your childhood. So, share with us a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. And glad to share with your listeners. I am a sur-THRIVER of incest and sexual assault. And the word sur-THRIVER, I had it trademarked because it just felt empowering. I wasn't just happy with calling myself a survivor or a thriver. So, sur-THRIVER. And then, of course, people say, well, what does that mean? And what does that stand for? And it's because I'm not ashamed of my past anymore. But yes, I am a sur-THRIVER of incest, sex, and sexual assault as a young adult. And I'm also an advocate. So I share my story, and I'm a professional speaker, an author, a podcaster, course creator. So there's lots of things that we can do.
That's amazing. So, I know that you have shared your story on a wide variety of different platforms, and you've talked a little bit about how it affected your self esteem and your self worth. So, tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, after being raped for years as a child, it does a lot of trauma. There's a lot of brain trauma, and I've been doing a lot of brain healing, and it is possible. Recovery and healing is possible, and I want survivors to understand that. Yes, it takes work, but it did affect my self-esteem, and those old demons creep up even at my age now. I still have, I get doubts, self-doubt, self-esteem, confidence, sometimes imposter syndrome. I mean, I'm human. But what I found out is that, even my friends who have not experienced the trauma I have, they have experienced self-esteem, confidence, self-worth, and imposter syndrome. So I'm more normal than I think. And that's what I want survivors to know, right?
So, obviously, you're still working on this trauma and working through a lot of, brain trauma that you have experienced. Tell us a little bit about how you came out of this traumatic experience and this shame. What have you done to really try and get yourself out of this?
I've done a lot of healing. My favorite TV mentor was Oprah Winfrey. So I watched her show for years. And of course, she is a sur-THRIVER of incest and sexual assault. And just watching her through the years, I thought, well, maybe I do need to get help because I was drinking a lot, doing drugs, self-sabotaging in so many ways. And I'm like, maybe this is affecting me more than I realized. And obviously was. So I called for help because of Oprah. And I got to tell her that. And we'll talk more about that. But I called for help, and I went through about 2 years of group therapy. But one thing I want your listeners to understand, I thought counseling one and done. I thought once I got through the counseling, okay, I've accepted what happened to me. I'm okay now. But your self growth and journey is an ongoing thing. So even after counseling, I found myself slipping back into self sabotaging ways, thoughts, habits, things that I was doing. So I started searching out for well being methods, affirmations, hypnosis, tapping, all sorts of things, and speaking with therapists again. And that's perfectly okay. So I've done a lot of healing.
Good. That's so good to hear. And, I want to hear a little bit about the long-term effect this trauma had on you. Obviously, this happened many, many years ago, but how is this still affecting you today in your day-to-day life, if at all?
Well, not so much anymore because, I've accepted it. And with the word sur-THRIVER, that means that I have released the shame of the crimes committed against me. And, but something that I have to work on daily is my self-esteem and my self-worth, confidence. So I use affirmations, and I share those in my courses and my coaching. And there's a right way to do affirmations and a wrong way, but it's that self-talk, that the voices in our head and what we think about ourselves. I'm always constantly, and maybe it affects trauma people, folks who have been through trauma more often than people who haven't. So we really have to keep our thoughts and our emotions and our thoughts in check and see where we are. And if we're in a negative state, we need to do something to pull us out into a positive state. And so a lot of things that I use is affirmations, or I call a friend.
So your story is about how your brother essentially raped you for years and years, and you kept this secret and to yourself. And he eventually died in 2009.
Mm.
How did the death of your brother affect you?
It really did not affect me. I hadn't seen him for many, many years. Um, he moved to California. I moved to Florida. I wanted as much real estate between us as possible. And when I finally told my mother and my other family members what he had done, he was very mad that I told them. And he said, "How could you hurt your mother that way?" Well, that's a typical narcissist, gaslighting me and blaming things on me. So, his death really didn't bother me. And I have to tell you, I loved my brother, but I hated my abuser. And I had to disassociate them. I had to look at one because I loved my brother. He was a cool big brother when he was nice to me. And that's how he groomed me. But so it wasn't until a year later, and after being on Oprah, because even a friend asked me when she saw me on Oprah and said, "You're still angry." And I was. I had forgiven myself for all the bad choices I made in my life, but I hadn't forgiven him or my other perpetrators. And I felt that hanging on to that anger and that not forgiving them was punishing them. But honestly, the only person it was punishing was me. So it was a year after he died that I went into a self-healing course. And I had a big breakthrough that weekend. And I walked outside and I said, "I can't change what you did to me, but I can change how it's in control of me. And I forgive you." Even though he was dead, and who's to say if I would have been able to forgive him while he was still alive. And here's what I want survivors to know. Yes, you can forgive your perpetrators while they're still alive, but it doesn't mean you have to have any contact with them. None whatsoever. You can forgive them on a level, because see, I thought forgiveness meant that what they did was okay. Absolutely not okay. So that was a huge breakthrough for me.
Well, that's so good to hear. And, I want to ask, you talked a little bit about when you finally came forward and told your mother about this. How did you get the confidence to finally say, "Today, I'm going to tell my mother what happened"?
I just knew for me that to continue to heal, I was in group therapy with 6 other women, and many of those women, breaks my heart to still think about it, but many of them were blamed for their fathers, uncles, brothers molesting them, and they were kicked to the curb. They were kicked out of the house and they were blamed for it. So when I told them in group that I was going to tell my mother and family, they were so concerned for me. And I said, No, I know my mother because my mother had volunteered at a domestic violence house and did a lot of things for women's associations. So I knew that she wouldn't react the way that the other ladies' families had. And my other siblings rallied around me. And what really surprised me, my mother says, well, I knew he was an SOB, but I didn't know he was so evil. And she believed me, and she didn't shame me or blame me, or she let me talk. And unfortunately, that's not the case for everybody else. And that's why I gave the TEDx talk. I talk a lot about that in my TEDx talk.
And we're going to discuss your TED Talk a little bit after we talk about your experience on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And I know we're all so excited to hear about this. So tell us about this experience of being on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Well, I want to share with you and your audience how I got on the Oprah Winfrey Show, because I literally jumped ship. I jumped off of a ship to be on her show. So I sent an email sharing my story, and I get an email back and said, we would love to talk to you about maybe you coming on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And we are going to record it on this date. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to be on a ship. It's my in-laws' 60th wedding anniversary. The whole family's going. And they said, well, can't you cancel it? I'm like, no, it's my in-laws, So what's really cool, they said, well, send us your itinerary. So I sent the itinerary. We fly up to Boston on Friday. We get on the ship on Saturday. On Sunday, I get an email from Harpo Studios, which is her company. And it says, we're going to record you. We're going to send you a plane ticket because the next port stop was on Tuesday. But I had to get permission, and I had to show proof to the captain of the ship that Oprah wanted me to fly to Chicago to be on her show. It was crazy, I'm telling you. But so I had to get permission from the captain, anybody who leaves a ship, because you're on board. So we get in to our first stop on Tuesday, and they have this plane ticket going to Chicago. They picked me up in a stretch limo, and my husband stayed on the ship. And what I found out was with my mother-in-law, she's like, my daughter-in-law is going to be on the Oprah Winfrey Show. So the whole ship knew. But I told my husband to stay because it was their 60th wedding anniversary. And I asked the directors of the show, I said, well, since my husband's staying, would it be okay if my sister joins me? And they sent her an airplane ticket, and they picked her up in a stretch limo and put us in a suite for the rest of the week. And they paid for our food and hotel, and it was really cool. But the day of the shooting, of course, we don't meet Oprah. She's sitting on stage. They walk me out to the stage, and they sit me down next to her. Okay, so I want to throw up about right now. I am so scared because really, I hadn't publicly told the world. I was telling the world today, sitting next to my mentor, my hero, what happened. And I was still angry. And I was writing my book, His Puppet No More. And I hadn't finished it. And had I finished it, I'd probably be a bestseller, but that's okay. I finished it the next year. But Oprah sitting there on stage, she made me comfortable. We talked I was on the first 30 minutes, and then they had another lady on the last half of the show. But I got to tell her in between the shows that she and her show saved my life. Because it was because of her and her show that I called for help. And that I knew that I needed help. And I wish I would have been able to say that on air to her, but she was asking questions, and it didn't fit in, but I was able to tell her at the break. So it was the scariest thing I've ever done, but it's the best thing I've ever done.
That's so phenomenal. I love that story so much. And
Yes, so I literally jumped ship to be on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And a media friend of mine wrote a blog on that. Rena Romano jumped ship to be on the Oprah Winfrey Show. I really did.
oh my gosh, that's amazing. What
I
a
know.
great experience. But like you said, it must have been so scary to first, this is your first time coming out to the world about your story. But I can't think of a better place to do it. So that's phenomenal.
Hello. Hello, with Oprah Winfrey, and the lady that she didn't know that she was encouraging me to get my life together, to save my life and overcome what had been done to me.
Exactly. And so, once you were on the Oprah Winfrey Show and you shared your story, what sort of doors did this experience open for you, whether that was, being able to tell your story elsewhere on different platforms?
Absolutely. Well, I knew that I wanted to be a professional speaker. So I joined an organization called Toastmasters. Have you heard of it?
Yes, amazing.
So I joined them so that would help me work on my confidence. But I didn't know how to share my story. So I became a certified speaking coach to learn how to structure presentations and keynotes and things like that. So I became a coach because by going through that program, I would learn how to give a speech. And it also became part of my business as speaking and a TEDx coach. But so I just started sharing, and I started reaching out to uh, crisis centers, sexual assault centers, and talking. And I here in Tampa, I did an evening. It's called Take Back the Night. I gave a 3-minute speech, and it was after being on Oprah. Really, that was the first time I'd been on stage to do something like that, and so it's just been uphill ever since.
That's awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about your TED Talk, which you discussed. The topic of your discussion was healing from sexual abuse can start with one word. And I really encourage everyone to go out and listen to Rena's TED Talk. It's so powerful. Um, and you obviously had spoken on Oprah before this.
Mm-hmm.
But how was your experience with TED, and how did you get the confidence to speak about your past on this big stage and on the red dot?
Will do. Yeah. Well, I want to clarify one thing. There are TED Talks and there are TEDx Talks. TED is on the international stage, and people like Brene Brown, Tony Robbins, Bill Gates, they get invited to come and be on the TED stage. Gave a TEDx talk, which is run by a local entity. So people can buy the licensing and the rights, and they call it TEDx, and they do them in your local communities, but they have to follow the TED format. Okay.
Got
So
it.
it's a TEDx, but the good news, my talk was uploaded to the main TED channel on YouTube. But if anybody wants to watch it, just go to YouTube or go to my website. And yes, healing from sexual abuse can start with one word. I won't tell you the word. You have to go watch. You have to, and yeah, come up with intriguing titles to get people to listen. So, but I giving that talk, I wanted it to really impact survivors around the world. I wanted it to be helpful to family and friends on how to speak to their loved ones who have been sexually abused or raped. And so I'm hearing the really cool thing. I'm hearing from survivors from all over the world, male and female, thanking me for my TEDx talk. And I think as of today, this recording, it's almost 210,000 views, which is phenomenal. It's been out there for 3 years. And so my goal is for that to hit 1 million and then keep going. because there are a lot of survivors out there that need this, and their families need to hear the message too. So giving a TEDx talk can put your story out there. Not everybody who is a survivor, though, wants to speak publicly, and they don't have to, but they must speak with somebody. And that's why we must make telling safe, to encourage healing and moving forward for survivors. So I'm very proud of the TEDx talk.
Amazing, amazing. And it's such a good talk. I listened to it a little bit earlier in the week. So everyone, please go out and listen to this. It was such a great talk.
And give me a thumbs up.
Give her a like.
Thumbs up. Yes, please, please, please. You know, when I first got my first thumbs down, I started laughing. I said, I've got critics. That means I've made it. So much fun. But, you know, the highlight of the TEDx talk is, yes, I'm hearing from male and female survivors thanking me. But I also heard from a former gymnast who, if you remember the Larry Nassar scandal, she sent me an email and said, I want to thank you. I'm a survivor of the Larry Nassar scandal, the gymnast and the coach. And she said, I want to thank you for your talk. And her name is Kayla Galica, and she's given me permission to use her testimonial. So a survivor from the Larry Nassar scandal, you know, sent me that message. That's huge. It's just, I didn't realize the impact that my TEDx talk would have, but I'm just very humbled and thrilled and grateful that it is having such a huge impact, because I'm hearing people say, because of your TEDx talk, I started counseling. Not long ago, I received an email from a young man that was suicidal. And he said, I want to thank you. I was ready to take my life, and then I saw your TEDx talk, and he got help. And I'm like, that's what it's all about. Even if you could just share your story with one person, it not only helps you heal, it helps them heal.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about empowering survivors of sexual abuse. So tell us what you're doing with that and what it is and where we can find it and contribute to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. My website, Rena, Rena Romano, ROMANO.com. I have a fast track course on there called Stop Self-Sabotage. And I'm working on a course now called Thriving After Sexual Abuse. And that's coming out this year. And it's video and audio PDFs, and it gives them all the things that I've learned and discovered to help keep me on a positive track after counseling. And this is one thing: I am not a therapist. I'm not a medical doctor. I am a certified well-being coach and leadership and speaking coach. But if anyone is in crisis, I am also on the RAINN Speakers Bureau, and RAINN stands for RAINN, the Rape and Incest National Network. So they can go to their website and call for help. So if you're in crisis, please call them, and they can help you find local information to help you as well. So that's what I'm working on: my podcast, my courses. I'm thinking about writing another book. My first one, like I said, was my memoir, His Puppet No More. And I didn't realize the impact that would have either. It's amazing. You don't think about this stuff. Some people set out with big intentions on what they want to do with things. I just put it out there, and stuff happens. Thank goodness.
I love it. So after all this discussion and all the resources that you've offered to us and really just opening up your life to us, what advice do you give someone going through sexual abuse right now, or someone that has experienced it in the past and they're truly afraid to come out and share it to the world? You know, what advice do you give those people?
You don't need to share it with the world, but you need to share it with someone, a counselor. And usually is not a friend, because friends don't know how to react, or family members, and you may not get the reaction that you're hoping for. So I would call a crisis line, call rain.org, RAINN.org, look up their phone number. Call your local crisis centers, sexual assault centers. Call somebody. If you haven't gotten help, you must talk about it, because holding it in makes us sick. I talk about it in my TEDx talk that the fella who did the graphics for my book, his mother finally told him, and the story's in the TEDx talk, so I'll let your listeners go listen to it, but how it unfolded. But she kept her secret in for years, and she had horrific, debilitating migraines. And once she's told her doctors and started talking about it, she was in her 70s, I think, her migraines started getting better and going away. But that pain has to go somewhere. And we either do it with drugs, alcohol, sex addiction, eating, or we get sick. You know, I had a mental physical breakdown years ago. My body was just shutting down. I had a bladder infection, kidney infection. I was just, because I was holding in all these secrets about what happened to me. And it can't stay in your body. It can't stay in your mind, because it's just going to explode. It's got to go somewhere. So call for help. You don't have to tell your family. You don't have to tell the world. You don't have to go on Oprah Winfrey unless you want to. You don't have to create a podcast. But you can do volunteer work, and you can do that anonymously too. You can, because when we help others heal, we heal, you know. And Mark Twain, he was an old storyteller from way back when, and he said the best way to cheer yourself up is go cheer somebody else up. And that's what I tell people all the time: share your story, go volunteer, because when we're giving and doing for others, it makes us feel good.
Absolutely. And I love that so much. And, you know, whenever I'm just down in the dumps or not feeling good or, you know, really negative and, you know, just not in a good headspace, I always try and get out and volunteer, because it does lift you up. It brings you up, brings your spirits up, and just turns your whole life around. So that is such great advice. Uh,
Yes.
so I want to finish out with a fun fact about you that I do with all of my guests. And I want to ask, what has been your most proud moment as an advocate for sexual assault and sexual abuse? And it can be any specific story, anything you've spoken on, anything you want to share that you're the most proud of.
Well, there's so many. First, I'd have to say being on Oprah, because it took a lot of courage to do that. Second is the TEDx talk. In 2019, I went to the state capital of Florida and was testified for the legislators to vote on a bill to eliminate the statute of limitations for child rape. And it passed. So I'm very proud of that. Another fun thing, because I talk about Brene Brown and Oprah in my TEDx talk, I sent a tweet to Brene Brown and shared it with her and shared the talk. And she sent me a tweet back. And she said, stay brave, because your courage matters and it's contagious. And I took a snapshot of, you know, a screenshot, and I've posted it all over my social media. Brene Brown tweeted me, woohoo. So there's so many fun things, you know. Look at all the little things and look at the fun things. So it, you know, your accomplishments don't have to be big. They can be small, but still make a big difference in somebody's life.
And you have accomplished so many wonderful things, even coming out of this traumatic experience, being able to get the confidence to share your story and be a true advocate for everyone, not just women, but women and men who have experienced sexual abuse and sexual assault. and you should feel so proud for all the work that you're doing for our community. And so I want to ask, where can we find you on social media? Where can we follow what you're doing and what you're working on?
Well, they can go to renaromano.com, RenaRomano, and just type in Rena Romano, because really my name is the brand. I didn't know how to come up with a creative company name. So it's Rena Romano and Associates is my company name. So I am the brand. But on YouTube, you can subscribe at Rena Romano TV. My podcast is called sur-THRIVER Unleashed, and it's on all the major podcast platforms. Like I said, the next thing that I'm working on is Thriving After Sexual Abuse, the online course for survivors, to share some of the things that helped me, and what I've discovered to help me continue healing and stay on a positive path. And so there you have it.
Amazing. Well, Rena, thank you so much for, being in this vulnerable position and sharing your story and giving my listeners the opportunity to learn from you and get some advice for you. So thank you so much for sharing and for speaking with me today.
Well, Ellie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on this show, because one voice can empower, so many. And it's all it takes is one story, one truth, and we can empower others. And, if anybody's looking for a mentor or coach, I have a mentoring and coaching program too. And if they're not ready for full-on coaching, I do mentoring calls, so they can go to my website and look that up as well. So I want to thank you for doing this and having this platform. So bravo to you, because we need to share our truth, because what a legacy. I have a friend, after she read my book, she said, just think of the women and men and their unborn children that you're touching with your story. That's quite a legacy. And so that's what I want to share with your listeners. Every small little thing you do is leaving your legacy. So make sure it's a great one.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rena.
Thank you.